Hi, I'm Valerie from Green Living Australia and also the author of the book Home Cheese Making Australia. So I wanted to talk to you today about how much culture to use when you are measuring your culture to add to your milk. There's a lot of confusion about this because there's lots of different books that give you set amounts, and then when you get a culture that's not from the same people who wrote the book, then it can be hard to determine. So the first thing you need to do is you're going to get your culture either in a kit or it's going to come separate. So you might be restocking your culture from a kit you already have. Go ahead and take out the pack of culture. And also with the Green Living Australia cultures, you're going to get a sterile jar. You're also going to get a sheet that tells you about the culture, its ingredients, and what cheeses it makes. So here's your culture. If you have stored this in the freezer, the first thing is to remember to leave it at room temperature for just a couple of minutes to take all the condensation off it. So something that comes out of the freezer is very cold, and then you need to go ahead and let it come to room temperature. So a few minutes later, it's room temperature. You're not going to have a problem with condensation, so you can go ahead and cut the packet open. So get your sterile jar, take off the lid, and then go ahead and cut your pack of culture open. I like to use a sharp knife to get into the corners of the packet and go ahead and scrape all of the culture into the sterile jar. This one has a packet that says it does 100 litres. So regardless of how much you scrape out, it's going to do 100 litres. If it's 1 teaspoon, it does 100 litres. If it's 2 teaspoons, it does 100 litres. We don't use fillers in our cultures, so they are pure. Those recipes that basically tell you use 1 teaspoon or 2 teaspoons and they're the same every time that you buy the culture, they stabilize them and they make sure it's always correct by adding fillers. Well, we're not going to do that. I'm just going to get the last little bit of culture out of the top of the packet as well, make sure I've got it all. Great. Now I've got about 3/4 of a teaspoon of culture in here, and that's enough for 100 litres. So depending on how much cheese you're going to make is going to determine how much of this culture you're going to use. If you're doing a 10-litre batch, it's 1/10. If you're doing a 5-litre batch, it's 1/20. I like feta a lot, and I make a lot of it, and our recipe for feta in our feta kit is suitable for 4 litres, gives you 750 grams, so that's what I do on a regular basis. So you need to use 1/25 of this container, regardless of how much is in the container. It's always 1/25 for 4 litres. I have found from experience that that is going to be about a drop. So these are the mini measuring spoons, and the smallest spoon is a drop, which is a 64th of a teaspoon. So 1 drop of culture is suitable for about 4 litres. It could be slightly more or slightly less, but the difference is going to be so small that it's not going to make much of a difference at all. It'll take a little bit longer to get to the correct pH or get there a little bit sooner, but overall, those changes could be caused by slight different temperature in the room at the time that you're making the cheese. So if I'm going to do an 8-litre batch, like if I'm doing a hard cheese like cheddar or Gouda or Colby, and I've got an 8-litre recipe, I'm going to use the next spoon up, which is the smidgen. So 1 smidgen, there's going to be about 12 of those. If you really wanted to, and you wanted to be extra careful about how much culture to use, you could actually count how many smidgens or how many drops there were, and then you would know exactly how much to use. Get a second sterile jar and go ahead and count them out. So from the first sterile jar, I'm going to see how many smidgens there are. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I've actually got 13. So this batch had a little bit more volume in than the last batch because I got 12 out of the last one. So I've got 13.5. So a smidgen, but not a stingy smidgen, would be perfectly suitable for an 8-litre batch. Okay? So now I've estimated the use of the culture that I'm using. I can go ahead, put it in my milk, and the rest of the culture needs to be stored in the freezer. The other thing I want you to do is I want you to write on this label what it is you just put in this jar. So I would write hard cheese culture on this one. If I had another bacteria, I could write yogurt culture, or I could write vegetable culture. So they're all going to come with a sterile jar. You need to write on it what's in it, because if once they're in the freezer, they actually all look exactly the same. So I hope you've learned something today. If you have any questions, you can always contact Green Living Australia at their website, greenlivingaustralia.com.au. There's lots of frequently asked questions on lots of subjects, so the question you have might already have the answer there. Thanks a lot.